Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Peter sent me a note and said, Steve, check out the story from the Associated Press. And the headline is interesting. Man loses legal bid to cash in $59,500 in chips from a now defunct New Jersey casino. The man cannot redeem the chips, which is almost $60,000 from that defunct casino. He bought them at an online auction, but a court has determined that they were probably stolen or misappropriated by an employee of the casino who was supposed to destroy them. And since they were sent out for destruction and just simply hadn't been destroyed, the court's saying they no longer have any value. And there's an interesting angle here because the question is, do chips retain value the way that money does? And I mean, I've seen somebody walk into Pawn Stars on the History Channel with old poker chips from casinos years and years and years ago in Vegas. And some of the casinos are gone, but the chips are collectible. They're collectible, but they don't retain their value the way currency does. So I've got some old coins laying around out here. And so, for instance, here is a solid silver Walking Liberty $50. That's what that's called. And now it's worth a lot because of its silver content. But if I wanted to, I could take this out and spend it because it is still worth 50 cents. However, that is a coin, not a chip. So the man picked up 389 chips in the auction and tried to cash them in with the state Treasury Department's Unclaimed Property Administration. Now you might say, wait, he's got the chips. What makes them unclaimed? Well, it turns out that the Playboy Hotel and Casino had issued the chips back when they were operating, and they only operated apparently from 1981 to 1984. As part of its closing, the casino took the money that they had taken in to sell the chips and transferred those funds to the Unclaimed Property Administration and said, hey, if anybody ever comes forward with a legitimate chip, you can pay them out of these funds. And I've talked about that before, the unclaimed property issue. And so there are situations where money in a stale bank account or things found in a safe deposit box are often seized by the state. And you can come forward and go, that's mine, but, the bank doesn't get to keep it just simply because you stop paying on your box, for instance. So, and it's going to vary from state to state. The man told the Unclaimed Property Administration that he bought those chips at an online auction and did not know their source. So New Jersey State Police eventually determined that the casino had hired a company to dispose of and destroy the chips, but a former employee of that company had pilfered several boxes of unused chips sometime around 1990 and put them in a safe deposit box at a bank. And again, that's the court coming to this conclusion. Interestingly, that safe deposit box apparently was abandoned by somebody, and those chips wound up at the auction as opposed to, why weren't they forfeited when the box wasn't claimed? But we don't know the answer to that. But Peter asked that, and I said, interesting question. So the ex-employee told authorities that he later declared bankruptcy and forgot about the bank deposit box. And that's the guy who had put the things in the bank deposit box. The bank where the chips were stored opened the box in 2010 and confiscated the chips, eventually sending them to the auction house from which this man purchased them. Now, again, they came out of a safe deposit box that had been forgotten about. The bank got them, and apparently they were allowed to send them to auction. So then the Unclaimed Property Administration rejected the man's claim in 2023, noting that chips had not been issued to patrons in the normal course of casino operations. And apparently that was part of the rules regarding whether these chips could be redeemed. But the fact that they were stolen also makes it a problem. The man appealed that decision, claiming in part that the Unclaimed Property Administration had relied on insufficient evidence and acted arbitrarily and capriciously. But in its ruling issued April 1st, the appellate court said the man was not entitled to funds because he did not present chips that had been issued by the casino. So they're saying if these chips had been issued by the casino properly to him, he could come back now all these years after the casino closed and cash them in. He could. However, when the Playboy Hotel and Casino turned the money over to the government as part of this process, the only chips that can be redeemable are the ones where people actually came in, bought the chips themselves, and then later came back to redeem them. Now, the question is, if you bought them legally and you gave it to somebody else, that might work also. But here the problem is these chips were stolen, meaning that the person who had them in the safe deposit box did not get them by paying money to the casino. That's what they're saying. And so I have to point out that when you see the phrase arbitrarily and capriciously, that is a standard. That is a standard. And so when you go up on appeal in a case, whether you are appealing from district court to circuit court, or from circuit court to appellate court, from appellate court to the state Supreme Court, that's how it works in Michigan, or if you're appealing up to the federal system and you go from court to court to court, as you climb the ladder, generally speaking, as the case gets narrowed, as the issues get narrowed, they'll often say what you need to prove to overcome something. And a lot of times where the facts appear to be pretty clear here, you can't just appeal and say, I don't like the result. You have to actually say what the lower court did wrong. And one of the things that you can say, and this is often a standard you hear, arbitrary and capricious. And that means that a court or an entity making a ruling made a ruling that was just willy-nilly. That's probably a pretty good another word for it, willy-nilly. And so the court on review is going to look at it and go, well, what evidence do they have before them? And is it reasonable they drew that conclusion? Okay. There's other standards out there. And there are situations where an appellate court can review something and say, we're going to go back to square one and review everything from the beginning. They can do that too. But what's interesting to me is, and this happened obviously a few years ago, but they introduced instant replay in sports, especially in football. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, this is just what this game needs, a lengthy appellate process. Now, the appellate process ain't that lengthy, and generally it works. But you'll notice that they'll often go, we're going to go to our rules guy in New York right now. And they connect some guy, they hook up with some guy remotely via satellite or something. And he reviews the play, and then he says, well, here's what I see. Here's what the rule says. And then to overturn that, you need clear and convincing evidence. That's one I've often heard. So the video's got to show a clear and convincing case that the refs got it wrong. And so if it's unclear or questionable or no camera got it just right, the ruling stands. And I've seen a couple where they've screwed that up. I can think of two. I'm a University of Michigan football fan. I can tell you the two that most of us point to, including a game at Michigan State just a couple years ago where the quarterback got sacked and the ball went flying. And they said, oh, he was down, which was physically impossible the way he was standing. They said, well, his shin touched the ground. His shin, not his knee, his shin. Don't get me going. It's a bad memory. We don't like to relive those bad memories. So, Peter, thanks for sending that. But the man bought the chips at an online auction. He didn't know where they came from, but the people with the money from the defunct casino have said, you can't redeem these. You can't redeem these because they were stolen. So there's an interesting angle there. So if that's from the Associated Press, man loses legal bid to cash in $59,500 in chips from a now defunct New Jersey casino, the Playboy Hotel and Casino. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Whoever said money doesn't buy happiness didn't know where to shop.